That truck will never learn. The mechanics mocked the new mechanic, but she was incredible. Daniela Vargas felt the weight of three pairs of eyes on her as she approached the yellow truck parked in the center of the workshop. Laughter echoed off the grease-stained walls, mixed with comments she pretended not to hear. This was no ordinary day. It was the day that would determine whether she would have a future in that workshop or return home ashamed of having failed. That's when one of the mechanics shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "That truck is never going to start. You can give up now, girl." Daniel swallowed hard and kept walking. The red uniform she wore still smelled new, unlike the worn and stained overalls of the other employees. She was 23 years old, with long hair tied back in a ponytail and hands that did not yet bear the marks of years of working with heavy tools. In the eyes of those men, she was nothing more than a girl lost in a world that was not her own. The workshop boss, Don Fernando, watched from a distance with his arms crossed. He was almost 60 years old, with a prominent belly and a gray mustache that he scratched whenever he was nervous. At that moment, he was scratching a lot. Hiring Daniela had been a favor he didn't want to do, a moral debt to a former employee who was no longer with them. Now, watching the situation unfold, Don Fernando bitterly regretted it. The truck in question belonged to Hector Mendoza, owner of the largest transport company in the interior of Puebla. It was an imposing vehicle with a shiny yellow cab, even under the dust accumulated from months of parking. The body was enormous, designed to carry tons of merchandise along the country's highways. But now it was there, useless, taking up valuable space in the workshop and generating a bill that grew every day. Three mechanics had tried to fix that engine in the last 4 months. All had failed. The most experienced was Ramon Fuentes, a 47-year-old man with a reputation that extended beyond that city. He had large, calloused hands, a scar on his right arm from an old accident, and a way of speaking that left no room for reply. Ramon was among those laughing at that moment, but his eyes showed something beyond amusement. There was malice there, a certainty that this girl would be just another disappointment. "Let me see if I understand correctly," said Miguel, another mechanic. "A guy in his 30s with gaps between his front teeth. Don Fernando hired her because she's Tonio's niece. That Tonio who left here, how many years ago?" "6 years," Ramon replied without taking his eyes off Daniela. "And he left because he didn't know how to work well. Now they're bringing in his niece, thinking she'll work out." The third mechanic, Javier, younger than the others but already with 5 years of experience in the shop, added with a laugh, "At least she's pretty, right? She'll add some color here in the workshop." Daniela heard everything but didn't react. She had learned from an early age that responding to provocations only made things worse. Her uncle Antonio, the Tonio they mentioned with contempt, had been a mechanic all his life. He had taught Daniela since she was a child, letting her help on weekends when he repaired cars in his garage. Tonio had passed away 3 years ago, taken by an illness that consumed his strength in a few months. But before he left, he made Daniela promise that she would follow her dream of working with mechanics, even if everyone said that it was no place for a woman. She walked over to the truck and opened the hood. The engine was a maze of metal parts, tubes, wires, and components that would seem impossible to understand to many. But to Daniela, it was like reading a book in a language only she knew. Her eyes scanned every detail as the laughter continued behind her. "She's put in 20 pesos and doesn't even know where to start," said Miguel. 20, I bet 50 she'll give up before lunch," added Javier. Ramon didn't bet, but he smiled in a way that showed he agreed with the others. Don Fernando remained silent, watching. He knew he had made a mistake in hiring the girl, but he owed Tonio a debt that weighed on his conscience. The former mechanic had saved the workshop from a serious problem years ago, and Don Fernando never had the chance to repay him before he left. When Daniela's mother appeared asking for a chance for her daughter, he couldn't refuse. Now, however, that decision seemed to be blowing up in his face. Daniela took a flashlight and began to examine the engine underneath. She spent almost an hour there in silence, checking every connection, every part, every tiny detail that could explain why that truck refused to work. The other mechanics eventually got tired of laughing and went back to their own jobs. But they kept an eye on her, waiting for the moment of failure. That's when Daniela noticed something strange. There was a part installed differently than it should have been. It wasn't exactly wrong, but it didn't follow the normal pattern either. It was a modification, something done manually for a specific purpose that she didn't yet fully understand. The part in question was a pressure regulator, but it was connected in a way that didn't make sense according to conventional manuals. She got up and walked over to where Don Fernando was, wiping her hands on an old rag. Don Fernando, I need to talk to you. The boss looked at her impatiently. He expected her to quit, not to want to talk about work. What's going on? This engine has a non-standard modification. Does anyone here know who did it? Ramon, who was close enough to hear, approached with an annoyed expression. Girl, you've been here for 3 hours and you already think you know more than us. This truck was checked by the best mechanics in the region. It doesn't have any weird modifications. The problem is the injection system. Everyone knows that already. Daniela shook her head. I saw it with my own eyes. The pressure regulator is installed differently. It's not a mistake, it seems intentional, but it's not in the manuals. If we try to fix it without understanding this first, it could make it worse. Don Fernando sighed deeply. He was tired of that truck. Tired of the pressure Hector Mendoza put on him every week. Tired of everything. Daniela, listen to me. You're new, you have no experience. Ramon has been working with trucks for 20 years. If he says the problem is the injection, then it's the injection. Do what you have to do and don't make things up that don't exist. The young woman tried to argue, but Don Fernando had already turned around and walked toward his small office in the corner of the workshop. Ramon smiled venomously. Did you hear what the boss said, sweetheart? Do your job and stop trying to be a know-it-all. Or better yet, go clean some parts, which is more your level. Daniela felt her blood boil, but she took a deep breath. She returned to the truck and continued examining it. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe it was really her inexperience making her see things that weren't there. But something inside her, something she couldn't explain, told her that this modification was important. The rest of the day passed slowly. Daniela worked quietly while the other mechanics did their own jobs. Miguel was fixing a small car that had problems with the gearbox. Javier was changing the oil in a pickup truck. Ramon supervised everything with an air of superiority, giving orders and making comments that made it clear who was in charge of the workshop when Don Fernando wasn't around. When the clock struck 5 p.m., Don Fernando appeared with an even more tense expression than in the morning. Folks, we have a situation. Hector Mendoza is coming here tomorrow morning. He is demanding a definitive answer about the truck. If we don't deliver it in working order, he will sue the shop and cancel the contract. A heavy silence fell over the warehouse. Losing the contract with Hector Mendoza's transport company would be a disaster. He was the shop's biggest customer, responsible for almost 40% of its income. Without him, Don Fernando would have to lay people off, maybe even close the doors. Ramon cleared his throat and stepped forward. Don Fernando, give me one more chance. I know where the problem is. I just need a few more hours. The boss looked at him with a mixture of hope and desperation. You have until tomorrow morning, Ramon. Do whatever it takes. Daniela watched everything in silence. She wanted to shout that they were ignoring something important, that the modification to the regulator should be investigated first. But she was just the new girl, Tonio's niece, who had been hired out of pity. Who would listen to her? Night fell and everyone left except Ramon. He stayed working on the truck, determined to solve the problem before sunrise. Daniela went home with a heavy heart. She lived with her mother in a simple house on the outskirts of town, a modest place, but one full of memories. It was there that Tonio spent his weekends teaching his niece everything he knew about engines. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please leave a like and above all, subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. Doña Carmen, Daniela's mother, was preparing dinner when her daughter arrived. She was a 52-year-old woman with graying hair and hands marked by a life of hard work. She had been a seamstress all her life, supporting the family on her own after her husband abandoned them when Daniela was still a baby. Tonio was her older brother and had been the father figure that was missing in the girl's life. How was your first day? Doña Carmen asked with a hopeful smile. Daniela sat down at the table and sighed. It was difficult, Mom. The guys don't take me seriously. They treat me like I don't know anything. But you do know, my daughter. Your uncle taught you everything he could. He always said you had a special gift, that you understood machines in a way he had never seen in anyone else. But they don't want to know anything about that there, especially Ramon. That older mechanic, he looks at me like I'm a nuisance. Doña Carmen served rice with beans and a piece of chicken. You know, your grandmother used to say that people fear what they don't know. When I was young and wanted to work outside the home, my father almost had a heart attack. He said that women should stay at home and take care of the children, but I insisted. I went to sew outside the home, and today he admits that it was the best decision. The problem isn't just prejudice, Mom. There's something wrong with that truck that they don't want to see. I tried to warn them, but no one listens to me. Then prove that you're right, not with words, but with results. Daniela ate in silence, thinking about her mother's words. How could she show results if they wouldn't even let her work properly? But one thing she knew. She wasn't going to give up. Not after everything Tonio had done for her. The next morning, Daniela arrived at the workshop earlier than usual. The sun was still rising when she parked her old motorcycle in front of the shed. To her surprise, she found Ramon still there, his eyes red from fatigue and his hands dirty with grease up to his elbows. "Did you manage to fix it?" she asked, more out of courtesy than hope. Ramon looked at her with irritation. Almost. Just one final adjustment. But when he tried to start the engine, nothing happened, not even a noise. The truck was completely dead. Ramon slammed his fist on the hood, letting out a loud curse. Daniela approached, but he pushed her away with a brusque gesture. "Get out of here. This is a problem for a real mechanic, not a girl who wants to play at being a mechanic." The words hurt, but Daniela walked away. She went to a corner of the workshop where the old parts and tools that needed cleaning were kept. Don Fernando had told her that until she proved her worth, she would be stuck with the simplest tasks. Cleaning parts was humiliating, but she would do whatever it took to keep her job. The other mechanics began to arrive. Miguel and Javier saw Ramon working frantically on the truck and exchanged worried glances. They all knew what was at stake. If Hector Mendoza wasn't satisfied today, the entire workshop would feel the consequences. At 9 a.m., a shiny black Mercedes-Benz pulled up in front of the workshop. Hector Mendoza got out of the car wearing an impeccable gray suit and an expression that left no doubt about his mood. He was about 55 years old, with neatly cut gray hair and a posture that exuded power. Don Fernando rushed out of the office to greet him. "Good morning, Don Hector. You're very early." "I'm not here to chat, Bana. Fernando, is it ready or not?" Well, before Don Fernando could finish, Hector was already walking toward the yellow truck. He saw Ramon still working, and his face turned red. "They're taking me for an idiot. This truck has been out of service for 4 months. 4 months that I've been losing money because I trusted your competition. Don Hector, please, give me a few more hours. We're almost done." Hector slammed his hand on the side of the truck. "Enough. I'm going to call Mario Velasquez's workshop. At least they deliver what they promise. And you can expect my lawyer here this week. You're going to pay me every penny I lost." Don Fernando turned pale. Being sued by Hector Mendoza meant certain bankruptcy. The man had infinite resources and contacts everywhere. He could drag the process out for years, bleeding the workshop dry until there was nothing left. "Sir, please, let's resolve this another way. I can do it. There's no other way. You're incompetent. It's that simple." That's when Ramon, desperate, had a terrible idea. He looked at Daniela, who was off cleaning parts, and shouted, "It's her fault. The new girl was messing with the engine yesterday. She must have messed everything up." Daniela dropped the tool she was holding and turned around, shocked. "I didn't even touch the engine. I just examined it from a distance." "That's a lie. I saw you messing with it, Mr. Fernando." "She ruined the work I did. That's why it won't start now." Hector Mendoza looked at Daniela with disdain. "Who is this?" "A new employee," explained Don Fernando, visibly uncomfortable. "But she's not authorized to meddle in important work." "Then why the hell was she near my truck?" Daniela felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This was an absurd injustice. She had tried to help, she had seen something the others had overlooked, and now she was being used as a scapegoat. "I didn't touch anything," she repeated firmly, despite the situation. "I just said there's a modification in the regulator that needs to be investigated." Ramon laughed scornfully. "Modification, girl. I know this engine better than the back of my hand. There's no modification. You don't know what you're talking about." Hector Mendoza was already losing his patience. Fernando, sort this mess out. I'll be back on Monday. If the truck isn't working, you'll have to sell this shop to pay me what you owe me." He left, leaving a heavy silence behind. Don Fernando turned to Daniela with an expression of anger she had never seen before. "You, to my office now." Daniela followed the boss, feeling the weight of the other mechanic's stares. In the small office filled with papers and the smell of old cigarettes, Don Fernando sat behind his desk and pointed to the chair on the other side. "Sit down." She obeyed. The man took several deep breaths before speaking. "I didn't want to do this, Daniela. I owed your uncle a debt. He was a good man, a good mechanic, but I can't put my shop at risk for that. You understand, right?" Daniela's heart raced. "He's going to fire me. What do you think? I have an angry customer threatening to sue me, a truck that doesn't work, and a new employee who already caused problems on her first day. What choice do I have?" "But I didn't cause any problems." Ramon lied. "I swear on everything sacred that I won't touch that engine. Even if you haven't touched it, the fact is that you're inexperienced. I can't trust you with important jobs, and I don't have room for someone who only knows how to clean parts. Give me a chance, please. Let me try to fix the truck." Don Fernando almost laughed at the proposal. "You fix a truck that Ramon, with more than 20 years of experience, couldn't fix? Are you crazy? My uncle taught me things that aren't in the manuals. Old techniques, different ways of thinking. Let me try. If I don't succeed by Monday, I'll leave without complaining. But if I do succeed, you will give me a real chance to work here." The boss scratched his mustache thoughtfully. It was an absurd proposal, but he was desperate. There was something in that girl's eyes, a determination that reminded him of Tonio. Maybe, just maybe, she had inherited her uncle's talent. "All right," he finally said. "You have until Monday morning, but if it doesn't work, you leave and never come back." "Understood. Understood." Daniela left the office with her heart racing. She had been given an opportunity, but it was a double-edged sword. If she failed, she would lose her queen and destroy the last good memory she had of Tonio. But she couldn't think about that. Now she had to focus on the job. When she returned to the workshop, Ramon was waiting for her. He had heard everything through the thin office door. "So you think you can do it, huh? You're going to do what I couldn't even try. Try all you want, doll. That truck will never start again. And when you fail, everyone will know that women have no place in a mechanic's workshop." Miguel and Javier watched the scene from afar. There was something strange about the way Ramon was reacting, but they didn't have the courage to question him. Ramon was almost a legend in that town, respected and feared in equal measure. Daniela ignored the taunts and went back to the truck. She had 2 days to do the impossible, and the first thing she needed to do was understand that mysterious modification to the pressure regulator. She spent the rest of the day examining every detail of the engine. She took photos with her old cell phone, made notes in a notebook, and compared them with diagrams she downloaded from the internet. The more she studied, the more certain she was that this modification was not a mistake. It was intentional, even ingenious. But who had done it and why? Night fell and everyone left, but Daniela stayed. She asked Don Fernando for permission to work through the night, and her boss, without much conviction, allowed it. When she was alone in the workshop, lit only by the dim lights on the high ceiling, Daniela felt the weight of responsibility. She was hungry and tired, but she couldn't stop. She went to the small makeshift kitchen in the corner of the workshop and made strong coffee. As she drank it, her eyes scanned the shelves full of old parts and ancient manuals. That's when something caught her attention. Among the dusty manuals was an old notebook with a worn leather cover. Daniela picked it up and opened it. On the first few pages were technical notes, drawings of engines, and part specifications. The handwriting was irregular but familiar. She turned more pages and her heart almost had stopped when she saw the signature in the corner of one of them. Antonio Vargas, 2018. It was her uncle's notebook. Tonio had left it there, forgotten or deliberately hidden, she didn't know. With trembling hands, Daniela began to flip through the pages more quickly. Years of experience were condensed into those pages. Creative modifications, improvised solutions, techniques that weren't in any manual. And then she found it. On a page marked with a piece of yellow tape, there was a detailed drawing of a pressure regulator installed exactly as she had seen it in the yellow truck. Underneath the drawing, Tonio had written, "Hector Mendoza's truck, modification for fuel economy, percent reduction in consumption." I did not officially document it for personal reasons. Daniela read that 3 times to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Her uncle had worked on that same truck. He had made that modification and for some reason had not left an official record. But why? She continued reading and found more information. Tonio explained in detail how the modification worked, what precautions were necessary, and most importantly, how to fix it if something went wrong. It was exactly what she needed. But there were still unanswered questions. Why had Tonio left the workshop? Don Fernando had said he left, but he never explained why. And that note about personal reasons for not documenting the modifications suggested that there was more to the story. Daniela carefully put the notebook away and returned to the truck. Now, with Tonio's instructions, she had a real chance of fixing that engine. She worked all night, following each step described in the notes. It was delicate work that required patience and precision. At 3 a.m., she was adjusting the last connection when she heard a noise. She turned quickly and saw a figure in the shadows near the shed door. Her heart raced. "Who's there?" The figure stepped forward, and Daniela recognized Ramon. He was standing there watching. "Working late, huh?" he said in a tone she couldn't decipher. "You scared me. What are you doing here at this hour?" "I forgot my purse." He took a few steps toward the closet where the employees kept their belongings. "And you think you are going to solve the problem by working overtime?" "I'm going to try." Ramon picked up the purse and turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "You know, your uncle was stubborn like that too. He thought he knew better than everyone else." "You see how that ended?" What do you mean by that?" But Ramon had already left, leaving the question unanswered. Daniela was disturbed by that comment. There was something she didn't know about Tonio's departure from the workshop, something that people didn't want to talk about. She decided she would investigate that later. For now, she had a truck to fix. She worked until dawn when sunlight began to stream through the dirty windows of the shed. Her body ached, her eyes burned, but she was almost done. At 7 a.m., Don Fernando arrived and was surprised to find her still there. "Did you spend the night here?" "I did, and I think I found the problem." The boss looked at the dismantled engine and shook his head. "I hope you know what you're doing. Today is Saturday, but Hector Mendoza could show up at any moment." During the day, the other mechanics arrived and were surprised to see Daniela's progress. She had dismantled parts of the engine that Ramon hadn't even touched. Miguel approached her curiously. "Do you really know what you're doing, or are you just guessing?" "I found my uncle's notes. He had worked on this truck before." Javier approached as well. "Seriously, Tonio, I didn't even know he had worked on that vehicle." Ramon, who was on the other side of the workshop, heard the conversation and walked toward them with heavy steps. Don Fernando didn't leave any notes. If he had, I would know. Daniela showed him the notebook she had found. "It's all here. He made a special modification to save fuel. That's why the engine doesn't respond to normal repairs." Ramon snatched the notebook from her hands and began to leaf through it with an increasingly grim expression. When he finished, he slammed the notebook shut. "This proves nothing. It could be pure fabrication." "What do you mean, fabrication?" "It's written in his handwriting. It has his signature. Anyone can forge that. You're trying to make yourself look good, putting words in the mouth of a man who can't defend himself because he's no longer here." Daniela felt anger rising within her, but Miguel intervened. "Ramon, with all due respect, why would the young lady make something like that up? And look, I remember Tonio. He was full of different ideas, always making creative modifications. It wouldn't be surprising if he had done something like that." Ramon turned to Miguel with eyes full of fury. "Are you saying I'm stupid? That I can't repair an engine that anyone else could repair?" "That's not it. It's just that nothing. This girl is making up stories to justify her incompetence, and you're believing it all." Don Fernando appeared, drawn in by the discussion. "What's going on here?" Daniela explained about the notebook and the notes. Don Fernando took the notebook and read it carefully. As he turned the pages, his expression changed. Something was bothering him, an old memory trying to surface. "Ramon," he finally said, "do you remember when Tonio left here?" "Sure, 6 years ago." "And do you remember why he left?" Ramon hesitated for a split second before answering. "Because he wasn't reliable. He was always making unauthorized modifications, putting the workshop at risk." Don Fernando continued to look at the notebook. "I remember it differently. I remember you coming to me, saying that you had found Tonio sabotaging engines on purpose. You said that a competitor was paying him to ruin our work. And that was the case. That's why you fired him. I never had any proof. I only had your word, and I trusted you because you were my most experienced mechanic. But now, looking at these notes, I wonder if I did the right thing. The workshop fell silent. Ramon was visibly tense, his hands clenched into fists. He's saying he believes this girl more than me. After everything I've done for this workshop, I'm not saying anything. I'm just thinking that maybe we misjudged Tonio. Daniela felt her heart race. They had accused her uncle of sabotage. That was why he had left. She never knew. Tonio never said anything. He always said he just had differences with his old boss. Ramon threw the notebook on the floor in anger. You want to believe her? Then let her repair the truck herself. When she fails, don't come to me for help. He stormed out of the workshop, slamming the door behind him. Javier and Miguel exchanged uncomfortable glances. Don Fernando picked up the notebook from the floor and handed it back to Daniela. I don't know what to believe anymore, but the clock doesn't stop. If you have a plan based on these notes, you'd better put it into action soon. Daniela nodded and went back to work, but her mind was in chaos. Ramon had accused his uncle of sabotage. Why? He was lying. If he was, what was his motive? And if not, did that mean Tonio had really done something wrong? She tried to push those thoughts aside and concentrate on the engine. Following the instructions in the notebook, she adjusted the pressure regulator to the correct position, checked all the connections, and rewired some cables that were not up to standard. It was meticulous work that took her hours. By the time she was finished, it was late afternoon. Don Fernando had left earlier, clearly stressed by the whole situation. Miguel and Javier were still there finishing their own work, but keeping an eye on Daniela. Do you really think it's going to work? Javier asked. I don't know, admitted Daniela, but it's my only chance. She finished the last adjustment and closed the hood of the truck. Now came the scariest part, trying to start the engine. She got into the cab, put the key in the ignition, and took a deep breath. Her hands were sweating. Miguel and Javier came over to watch. Daniela turned the key. The engine made a noise. It coughed, but didn't start. She tried again. Same result. On the third attempt, nothing. The truck remained dead, stubbornly refusing to start. Damn it, she muttered, hitting the steering wheel. Javier shook his head. It was worth the effort. At least you tried. Miguel was kinder. Sometimes things don't work out, even if we do everything right. Don't blame yourself. But Daniela wasn't ready to give up. There had to be something she was missing. Something she had forgotten. She got out of the K and opened the hood again. Her eyes scanned every part, every connection. Everything was just as Tonio had noted. So why wasn't it working? And then she remembered. When she was a child, Tonio used to fix old engines in the garage. The engine refused to start until he made a minor adjustment to a specific valve. He had explained to Daniela that some engines had their quirks, small details that made all the difference, but that weren't in any manual. She looked for that valve in the truck's engine. It was hidden, almost invisible, among other parts. Daniela adjusted it slightly, just a few millimeters. It was such a small detail that it might not change anything, but she had to try. She returned to the cab. Miguel and Javier were already getting ready to leave, clearly without hope. Daniela put her hand on the key once more, closed her eyes, and said a silent prayer. Then she turned it, the engine coughed, then purred, and then miraculously started. A powerful, steady sound filled the workshop. The yellow truck was alive, running perfectly after months of inactivity. Miguel and Javier were speechless. Daniela couldn't believe it. Tears began to run down her face, a mixture of relief, joy, and exhaustion. She had done it against all odds. She had done it. I can't believe it, yawned Javier. You really did it. Miguel began to laugh in pure surprise. Don Fernando needs to see this, and Hector Mendoza too. Daniela turned off the engine and got out of the cab with trembling legs. She could barely stand up from exhaustion and excitement, but before she could celebrate, she heard heavy footsteps behind her. Ramon had returned. He looked at the truck, then at Daniela, then at the other two mechanics. His expression was unreadable. Did you start it? Yes, starting it once doesn't mean it's fixed. It could have been luck. Daniela returned to the cab and started the engine again. It started on the first try, purring softly and powerfully. She revved it a few times to show that it was stable. Then she turned it off and got out. It wasn't luck. It was following my uncle's instructions. Ramon clenched his teeth. There was something dangerous in his eyes. Now your uncle wasn't the saint you think he was, and you're not the perfect mechanic you claim to be, Daniela replied, surprising herself with her own courage. Why did you accuse him of sabotage? What really happened? That's none of your business. Yes, it is. He was my uncle. I deserve to know the truth. Ramon took a threatening step toward her, but Miguel stepped between them. Enough, Ramon. The young lady fixed the truck. There's nothing left to discuss here. Not anymore indeed, Javier agreed, standing next to Miguel. Ramon looked at them with surprise and anger. They had been his allies until now. But now there was something different there, a subtle change in the dynamics of the workshop. They're going to choose her side, the side of this girl who arrived yesterday. We're not choosing sides, Miguel said. We just recognize that she did a job that none of us could do. That counts for something. Ramon spat on the ground and left without saying another word. The silence that remained was tense but somehow liberating. Daniela felt that something important had changed, not only for her but for the entire workshop. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please leave a like and above all, subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Continuing. On Sunday, Daniela couldn't sleep well. She kept wondering what would happen on Monday when Hector Mendoza returned. Would the truck still work? Would Don Fernando keep his word and let her work for real? And Ramon, what would he do now? In the morning, she went to visit her mother. Doña Carmen was in the small courtyard tending to the plants. When Daniela arrived, her daughter told her everything that had happened since the discovery of the notebook, until the moment she managed to start the engine. My goodness, daughter, said Doña Carmen with tears in her eyes. Your uncle would be so proud. He always said you were special. Mom, there's something I need to know. Why did Uncle Tonio leave that workshop? What really happened? Doña Carmen became serious, went to the kitchen, and poured 2 glasses of orange juice. She sat down at the table and motioned for Daniela to join her. I never told you because your uncle asked me not to. He didn't want you to get angry or resentful, but I think you need to know now. What was it, Mom? Your uncle was accused of sabotage. An older mechanic named Ramon told Don Fernando that he had seen Tonio damaging engines on purpose. Of course, it was a lie, but Don Fernando believed him. They fired your uncle on the spot without even giving him a chance to defend himself properly. But why would Ramon do something like that? Envy, my daughter. Your uncle was too good at what he did. He had innovative ideas. He fixed things that others couldn't. Ramon felt threatened. He was afraid of losing his position as the best mechanic in the shop. Daniela felt anger burning inside her, and Uncle Tonio never tried to prove his innocence. He tried, but without concrete evidence, there was no way. And you know how proud your uncle was? He said he wasn't going to beg for a job in a place where they didn't trust him. So he left and started working on his own, fixing cars in the garage at home. He should have fought harder. There's no should have, Daniela. Your uncle did what he thought was right. And look, in the end, he was happy in his own way. Don't cling to the past. What matters is the future you're going to build. Her mother's words made sense, but Daniela still felt a burning sense of injustice in her chest. Her uncle had been humiliated, expelled from a place to which he had contributed so much. And the person responsible for that was the very man who was now trying to do the same to her. She spent the rest of Sunday restless, counting the hours until Monday. When it was finally time to go to the workshop, she woke up earlier than necessary. She wanted to be there before everyone else, to make sure the truck was still working. When she arrived at the workshop, someone was already there. It was a woman in her early 60s with white hair tied back in a bun. She was standing next to the yellow truck, running her hand over the bodywork as if she were caressing something precious. Excuse me, said Daniela, approaching her. The workshop is still closed. It doesn't open for another hour. The woman turned around and Daniela saw that she had tears in her eyes. You're Daniela, right? Tonio's niece. Yes, who are you? My name is Elena. I was a friend of your uncle's. Actually, we were more than friends. Daniela was surprised. Tonio had never mentioned anyone named Elena. You knew my uncle? I knew him very well. We dated for almost 3 years until he got sick. This was news to Daniela. She knew her uncle had had casual girlfriends, but nothing serious, or so she thought. She didn't know he had been in a serious relationship. Doña Elena smiled sadly. He was secretive about those things, but he talked about you all the time. He said you were like a daughter to him, that he was very proud of the woman you were becoming. The two were silent for a moment. Then Doña Elena continued, I heard you fixed this truck. It's what Tonio would have wanted. He always said this job here was the best he'd ever done, the smartest modification. He was so upset that Don Fernando hadn't given it any value. Do you know why my uncle didn't officially document the modification? Doña Elena nodded. I know. He told me at the time. It was shortly before he was fired. Ramon discovered the modification and threatened Tonio. He said that if he took credit for it, he would have him fired. Tonio didn't believe him. He thought it was just talk. But Ramon carried out his threat. Daniela nodded that the puzzle was finally complete. Ramon had not only accused his uncle of sabotage out of envy, he had done so specifically to prevent Tonio from receiving recognition for that innovative modification. It was pure cruelty. Why are you here today, Doña Elena? The lady opened her purse and took out a small metal box. When Tonio fell ill, he asked me to keep some important things safe. He said that one day you would need them. I didn't understand it then, but now it makes sense. She handed the box to Daniela. Inside was a small but clearly important mechanical part. What is this? It's the original part that Tonio removed when he made the modification. He kept it in case he ever needed to reverse the work, but he also kept it as proof that he was the author of that innovation. Daniela held the piece carefully, as if it were a treasure. In a sense, it was exactly that. Thank you, Doña Elena. This means a lot to me. Use it well, girl, and make your uncle proud of you. Don't let any man belittle you. You have his talent. I can see it. Doña Elena left shortly after, leaving Daniela alone with her thoughts. She put the box in her backpack and decided it was time to make some changes in that workshop. Don Fernando was the first to arrive. He was surprised to see Daniela already there. Did you sleep here? No, I just got here early. I wanted to make sure the truck still works. And it works? Yes, do you want to see? They went to the truck and Daniela started the engine. It started smoothly without any problems. Don Fernando looked at her with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. You really did it. I didn't think it was possible. My uncle taught me well. About your uncle, I need to apologize to you. I was unfair to him. I believed accusations without proof, and that still haunts me today. Why did you believe it? Don Fernando sighed heavily. Because I was a coward. Ramon was my best mechanic. He had a great reputation. If I confronted him, other mechanics might leave too. I was afraid of losing the workshop, so I chose the easy way out, which was to believe him and fire your uncle. And now I see that I made the wrong decision. Your uncle was worth 10 Ramons, and you're proving that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Daniela wanted to say many things, but at that moment, Hector Mendoza arrived. He entered the workshop with the same imposing posture as always. But this time, Don Fernando was not trembling with fear. Good morning, Don Hector. The truck is ready. Hector stopped and looked at them suspiciously. Ready. After 4 months, you want me to believe you fixed it in a weekend? See for yourself. Hector walked toward the truck. Daniela was standing to one side holding the keys. When the man saw her, he looked questioning. Her again. Wasn't she the one they said had ruined the job? That was a misunderstanding, Don Fernando said quickly. Actually, she was the one who fixed it. Hector laughed with disdain. You're joking with me. You want me to believe that this girl did what Ramon, with all his experience, couldn't do? Believe it or not, it's the truth. She discovered that the engine had a special modification that we didn't know about. A modification made by her uncle who used to work here. Hector crossed his arms. All right, then start that truck, and you better make sure it runs perfectly, or my lawyer will turn this workshop into rubble. Daniela got into the cab. Her confidence was much greater now than it had been on Saturday. She started the engine and it responded immediately with a healthy, loud roar. She accelerated several times, showing that it was stable. Then she turned it off and got out. Hector remained silent for a long moment. Then he walked around the truck, inspecting every detail. Finally, he turned to Daniela. How did you manage this? Daniela explained about her uncle's modification, about the notes she found, about the special care that this specific engine needed. Hector listened to her with growing attention. So, are you telling me that this truck has a handmade modification that saves 18% fuel? Yes, sir. My uncle was very good at what he did. And why didn't anyone document this? Why didn't I know about this? It was Don Fernando who replied in a heavy voice. Because I made a mistake, Don Hector. I didn't value the work of the mechanic in charge and ended up losing him over nonsense. Hector shook his head, clearly impressed. Well, the important thing is that it works now, and if it really saves fuel, as you say, I want you to make that modification to all my trucks. All 73 of them. Daniela felt her heart racing. 73 trucks. It was a huge job that would take months, but it was also an opportunity she never imagined she would have. I can do it, she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Excellent. I'll draw up a new contract with this workshop, but there's one condition. She pointed to Daniela. She has to be the technical manager for all the services on my vehicles. I don't want amateurs messing with my trucks anymore. Don Fernando felt both excited and sad. Of course, Don Hector. Daniela will be promoted immediately. At that moment, Ramon arrived. He stopped at the door when he saw the scene. Hector Mendoza, Don Fernando, and Daniela were talking next to the running truck. Miguel and Javier had also arrived and were watching from a distance. What's going on? Ramon asked. Hector turned to him. You're Ramon, the experienced mechanic, the very same. So tell me something. How is it that you spent 4 months unable to fix an engine that this young lady fixed in a weekend? Ramon opened and closed his mouth, not knowing how to respond. Hector continued relentlessly. You're either incompetent or you did it on purpose, because I don't see any other explanation. The engine had a complex problem. It took time to diagnose. She diagnosed it in 1 day and fixed it in 2. You had 4 months. Don't give me cheap excuses. Ramon's face turned red. He looked at Don Fernando for support, but the boss looked away. Don Fernando, Hector said, I don't want this man near my trucks. Either he leaves or I take my business elsewhere. You choose. It was a bomb that exploded in the workshop. Ramon, the most experienced and respected mechanic, was being cornered by a rookie. Miguel and Javier exchanged shocked glances. Don Fernando took a deep breath. It was a terrible decision, but the choice was obvious. Losing Ramon was bad. Losing Hector Mendoza was catastrophic. Ramon, I think it's best if you leave. Take your things and you don't need to finish, Ramon said sharply. I'm leaving, but before I do, there are some things that need to be said. He turned to Daniela with hatred in his eyes. You think you won, huh? That you're better than everyone else? Well, you should know that your uncle was a thief. He stole spare parts from the workshop and sold them on the side. I found out and reported him. That's why he was fired. That's a lie, shouted Daniela. It's the truth. And you're going to be just like him, a fraud. No matter what you've done with this truck, you'll always be just the niece of a thief. Daniela felt tears of rage burning her eyes, but before she could respond, Don Fernando intervened. Enough, Ramon. You've gone too far. No, let him continue, said Daniela with a strength she didn't know she had. Let him show everyone what kind of person he is. Ramon took a threatening step forward. You don't know anything, girl. You weren't here when things happened. You don't know what your uncle did. I know he was honest. I know he was a brilliant mechanic. And I know you envied him. You envied him so much that you made up lies to get rid of him. Proof, Ramon spat. Where's the proof? Daniela opened her backpack and took out the box that Doña Elena had given her. She showed the original part that was inside. This is the part my uncle kept. The proof that he made that modification. He had talent. He had creativity. Things you never had. That's why you destroyed him, because you knew you would never be as good as him. The workshop fell completely silent. Ramon stared at the spare part as if it were a snake about to attack him. Hector Mendoza watched everything with growing interest. There's more, Daniela continued, gaining courage. I know you sabotaged the previous repairs on this truck. By the way, you wanted the workshop to lose the contract, and I know why. You have a partnership with Mario Velasquez's workshop, right? Did you want the customer to go there? Ramon turned pale. Where did you get that crazy idea? It's not an idea, it's the truth. And I can prove it. In reality, Daniela was bluffing. She had a suspicion based on comments she had heard, but she had no concrete evidence. However, Ramon's reaction confirmed her suspicions. The man was too nervous, sweating cold. Miguel stepped forward. You want to know? I always found it strange how Ramon's repairs sometimes made things worse instead of better. I remember at least 3 times that happened with important vehicles. Javier nodded. I noticed it too, but I never had the courage to say anything. I thought it was just my impression. Hector Mendoza was becoming more and more interested. You're telling me this man was sabotaging my truck on purpose? I don't know, said Don Fernando, still processing everything. But if it's true, that explains a lot. It explains why the problems only got worse. Why did it take us so long to deliver? Ramon realized he was losing control of the situation. He pointed a trembling finger at Daniela. You're going to regret this, you and this entire workshop. Is that a threat? Hector Mendoza asked in an icy voice. In front of witnesses. Ramon realized he had said too much. Without saying another word, he took his personal tools from a cabinet and left the workshop. Everyone heard the sound of his old truck while he was starting up and driving away with a roar. The silence that followed was heavy. Hector was the first to speak. Don Fernando, I hope you take action on this. If I find out there was intentional sabotage, I will want compensation. Of course, Don Hector, I will investigate everything. Excellent. And as for you, he turned to Daniela, you start tomorrow as technical manager. I want a plan for how to make the modification to the other trucks, and I want you to document everything properly this time. No work without a record. Yes, sir. Can you count on me? Hector shook her hand, a gesture of respect that few received from that powerful man. Then he left, leaving the workshop in a state of collective shock. Don Fernando sat down on a nearby bench, running his hands over his face. I can't believe what just happened. In one weekend, my workshop has been turned upside down. For the better, said Miguel. Admit it, boss. We've been going backwards for a long time. Maybe this is the push we needed, Javier agreed. And look, I didn't know Tonio very well, but if he was anything like Daniela, we lost a very good mechanic when he left. Daniela felt grateful to those 2 men. They could have sided with Ramon. They could have continued to ridicule her, but they chose to recognize merit where it existed. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. Thank you, she said. I know it wasn't easy for you either. Miguel shrugged. We just did the right thing. And hey, sorry about the comments earlier. We were being silly. They were, Daniela agreed. But she smiled to show she held no grudge. The next few days were crazy. Daniela worked tirelessly to create a detailed plan for how to implement the modification on the rest of Hector Mendoza's trucks. She documented every step, created diagrams, and wrote clear instructions. It was meticulous work that required attention to every detail. Miguel and Javier became her allies, helping her when she needed it and, more importantly, learning. The dynamics of the workshop had completely changed. The macho and hostile atmosphere of before no longer existed. There was mutual respect, teamwork, and a feeling that everyone was pulling in the same direction. At first, Don Fernando was wary of placing so much responsibility on such a young employee. But as he saw Daniela's work, his confidence grew. She was not only competent, she was exceptional. She had the same mechanical intuition as Tonio, the same ability to see solutions where others only saw problems. A week after the big confrontation, Don Fernando called Daniela into his office. Sit down, he said, looking uncomfortable. Daniela obeyed, curious about what was to come. I'm thinking of making some changes in the workshop, and I wanted your opinion. My opinion? Yes, you're young, you have new ideas, and you clearly know what you're doing. So tell me, what would you change here if you could? Daniela didn't expect that question. She thought for a moment before answering. First, I would train the team better. There are new techniques, more efficient ways of working. Second, I would document everything, every modification, every special repair, so we can avoid problems in the future. And third, I would make room for more women. Don Fernando raised his eyebrows. More women, Shimon? Yes, there are many girls who want to work in mechanics, but they don't have the opportunity. If we showed that it's possible for a woman to be as good as any man in this field, that would change a lot of things. The boss scratched his mustache thoughtfully. You're right. I never thought about that. I always believed that mechanics was a man's job because that's what everyone said. But you proved that's nonsense. So you support the idea, I support it, and more. I want you to lead it. Create a training program. Bring other women here. Let's make this workshop a different place, even better. Daniela felt her heart race. It was more than she had dreamed of when she accepted that job. It was an opportunity to make a real difference, to honor Tonio's legacy in a way he never could. I'm going to make this happen, she promised. And she did. In the months that followed, Daniela worked tirelessly. She trained Miguel and Javier in the techniques she had learned from Tonio. She implemented the fuel-saving modification on all of Hector Mendoza's trucks, always documenting every detail. And most importantly, she started a training program for women interested in mechanics. Dear listener, if you are enjoying this story, please leave your like, and above all, subscribe to the channel. This helps us a lot as we are just starting out and continuing. The first class had 5 students. They were women of various ages, from an 18-year-old girl to a 45-year-old woman who had always wanted to work with cars but never had the courage to try. Daniela taught them everything she knew with patience and dedication. Word of the program spread. Local newspapers reported on the workshop that was breaking gender barriers. Other companies began to inquire about similar training programs. Don Fernando's workshop, which had previously been just one of many, was now known as an innovative and inclusive place. Hector Mendoza was so pleased with Daniela's work that he signed an exclusivity contract. All of his transport company's vehicles would be serviced only at that workshop. It was a guarantee of work and income for years to come. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There was resistance from some older customers who did not trust being served by a woman. There were malicious comments in the city, with people saying that Daniela had gotten the job through means other than competition. There were even anonymous threats, probably coming from Ramon or his allies. Daniela faced everything with the strength she inherited from her uncle and her mother. She did not let the comments affect her. Every time someone doubted her, she simply did her job so well that the doubts disappeared. The results spoke louder than words. 3 months after that fateful day with the yellow truck, the workshop was transformed. There were now 2 permanent mechanics, in addition to Daniela, both trained by her. Miguel had become her right-hand man, taking on the supervision of the most complex jobs. Javier had specialized in diagnostics using new equipment that the workshop had purchased with the extra income. Don Fernando, who had previously been a distant and sometimes unfair boss, had become a mentor. He openly admitted that he had learned a lot from Daniela, not only about mechanics, but also about managing people and giving opportunities. One day, Daniela was working on an engine when she received an unexpected visitor. Doña Elena appeared in the shed accompanied by an older man whom Daniela did not know. "Hello, Doña Elena. What a nice surprise," said Daniela, wiping her hands. "Hello, my dear. I brought someone who wanted to meet you. This is Dr. Sergio. He was a friend of your uncle's." The man extended his hand. He was about 65 years old, with graying hair and a friendly smile. "Nice to meet you, Daniela. Tonio talked a lot about you. He was certain you would be an exceptional mechanic." "It seems he was right. Thank you. Did you work with my uncle?" "Not exactly. I'm a mechanical engineer. I worked for years at a vehicle assembly plant. I met Tonio at a seminar on automotive innovations. We became friends, and he showed me the modifications he had invented. I was impressed by his creativity." Doña Elena interrupted. "I told Dr. Sergio about what you did here, about the training program and everything else. He was very interested." "Interested in what?" "In documenting your uncle's work," explained Dr. Sergio. "That modification he made to save fuel is brilliant. With a few adjustments and more rigorous testing, it could be patented and benefit many people." Daniela was surprised. "Patented? Is that possible?" "Yes, and best of all, the credit would go to your uncle. Posthumously, of course, but it would still be official recognition of his work. His name would go down in the records as the inventor of an innovative fuel-saving technique. It was more than Daniela could have dreamed of. Her uncle, who had been humiliated and expelled from that workshop, would now have his name officially recognized. It would be redemption, an important belated justice. "I want to do it. How do we start?" The following months were very busy. Dr. Sergio documented everything about Tonio's modification. He conducted laboratory tests. He compared it with similar techniques. He proved that it was truly innovative. Daniela provided all the notes she had found, plus her own experience implementing the technique. The patent process was long and bureaucratic, but it was finally approved. Antonio Vargas, Tonio, was officially recognized as the inventor of a fuel-saving engine modification technique. His name was forever recorded in the history of Mexican automotive engineering. When the news spread, many people came to Daniela. Other mechanics wanted to learn the technique. Transportation companies wanted to implement it in their fleets. Universities invited Daniela to give lectures on her uncle's work. But the most special moment came when the city council decided to honor Tonio. They held a simple but emotional ceremony where they placed a plaque in his memory in the central square. The plaque read, Antonio Vargas Tonio, innovative mechanic, dedicated mentor, proved that creativity and knowledge have no limits. Daniela was there with her mother, Doña Carmen, and Doña Elena. Don Fernando was also present, clearly moved. When the plaque was unveiled, tears rolled down Daniela's face. It was the recognition her uncle deserved, which she had fought so hard to achieve. After the ceremony, Don Fernando called her aside. Daniela, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago. What is it, Don Fernando? I was unfair to your uncle. Very unfair. And it wasn't just because I believed Ramon's lies. It was because I was afraid. Afraid that he was better than me, that he would take my place. So when Ramon gave me an excuse to get rid of him, I took advantage of it, and I've lived with this guilt all these years. Daniela didn't know what to say. Seeing that older man who had always been so proud, admitting his mistakes was surprising. Your uncle was a better man than I was, Don Fernando continued, and you are a better mechanic than I ever was. I'm proud to have you in my workshop, and I'm trying to be a better person thanks to the example you set. Thank you, Don Fernando. That means a lot. They hugged briefly, a gesture of reconciliation and peace. The following years were prosperous. The workshop grew, now with a mixed team of male and female mechanics. The training program became a benchmark in the region, with several former students opening their own workshops. Daniela was invited to give talks at technical schools, encouraging young women to pursue careers in traditionally male-dominated fields. Hector Mendoza not only maintained the exclusive contract, but also became an advocate for the program. He spoke to other business owners about the importance of providing equal opportunities and valuing competence over prejudice. His transport company became an example of inclusion in the industry. Miguel and Javier became excellent mechanics under Daniela's guidance. They often said that they learned more from her in a few months than they had learned in previous years. Most importantly, they passed on that philosophy, treating everyone with respect, regardless of gender. 5 years after that fateful day with the yellow truck, the workshop underwent a major renovation. Don Fernando was preparing to retire and wanted to leave the place renovated. On the day of the renovation, there was a celebration with the entire community. The highlight was when they unveiled a wall of honor in the main shed. There were photos of important mechanics in the history of the workshop. In the center was a large photo of Tonio smiling and holding a tool. Below the photo was a bronze plaque with the words he always repeated, "Knowledge has no gender." Next to Tonio's photo, Don Fernando had placed a photo of Daniela next to the yellow truck taken on the day she managed to get it running. It was a symbol of continuity, passed down from one generation to another. During the party, Daniela climbed onto a small platform to give a speech. She looked out at the crowd. Her mother, Doña Elena, her co-workers, her students, clients, friends, all there for a girl who refused to give up when they told her she wasn't capable. 5 years ago, she began, I came to this workshop without knowing if I would have a chance. I was just Tonio's niece, trying to prove that I deserved to be here. Today, I am the technical manager of one of the best workshops in the region. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we have shown that competition has no gender, issue, or origin. It only has hard work, dedication, and the courage to face those who say you can't do it. The crowd applauded. Daniela continued, My uncle taught me that machines don't lie. If you understand them, if you respect them, they work. It doesn't matter if the person repairing them is male or female, young or old, rich or poor. The engine won't start if the mechanic is prejudiced. It just wants to be treated with knowledge and care. More applause. Daniela felt tears in her eyes, but they were good tears. I want to thank Don Fernando for giving me this opportunity, even when he had doubts. I want to thank Miguel and Javier for changing their minds and supporting me when I needed it. I want to thank all the women who joined this program, proving every day that we are capable of anything. And I want to thank Hector Mendoza for believing in me when I was just a scared rookie. Hector was in the crowd and nodded with a smile. But above all, Daniela concluded, I want to thank my Uncle Tonio. He is no longer here, but I feel that he is smiling from wherever he is, because he always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. This workshop, this program, all these achievements are for him. They are proof that honest work and true knowledge always triumph in the end. The crowd burst into applause. Several people were moved to tears by her words. Doña Carmen ran to hug her daughter, whispering in her ear how proud she was. Doña Elena also joined in the embrace, saying that Tonio would be overflowing with happiness. After the festivities ended and everyone left, Daniela remained alone in the shed for a moment. She walked over to the yellow truck that was still there, now used to train younger students. She ran her hand over the bodywork, remembering that tense day when everyone thought she would fail. We did it, Uncle, she whispered. We did it. And in that moment, under the dim lights of the workshop, with the familiar smell of grease and oil in the air, Daniela felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Complete peace. She had honored her uncle's legacy, proven herself, changed lives, and broken barriers. But more important than all that, she had become who she was always meant to be, an exceptional mechanic, an inspiring leader, a strong woman who would not be defeated by anything or anyone. In the years that followed, Daniela received several tempting offers. Large companies offered her well-paid positions in other cities. Universities invited her to teach, but she always refused. Her place was there, in that workshop that had belonged to Tonio, which was now hers. She never stopped innovating. She developed new modifications, always documenting everything carefully. She published technical articles that were a reference in the field. The training program expanded, now serving not only women, but anyone who wanted to learn real mechanics, without prejudice or barriers. One day, almost 10 years after the yellow truck incident, Daniela was supervising one of the youngest students when a familiar Mercedes-Benz pulled up in front of the workshop. Hector Mendoza got out, now older but still imposing. Don Hector, how good to see you, Daniela greeted him. Daniela, my dear, I came to tell you some news. Good news, I hope, the best possible. I'm retiring. I'm going to pass the transport company on to my children, but before that, I wanted to do something. He handed Daniela a large envelope. What's this? Open it and you'll see. Inside the envelope were official documents. Daniela read with growing attention. Her eyes widened with each page. They were company papers. Hector was offering her 20% of Don Fernando's workshop. I don't understand, she said, confused. It's simple. I bought Don Fernando's workshop. He's happy with the deal. You can ask him. And now I'm transferring my share to you. You deserve to own this place. You helped build it. Daniela was speechless. Partial ownership of the workshop was a dream she didn't even know she had. It meant security, official recognition, decision-making power. Don Hector, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep changing lives, breaking barriers, proving that impossible is just a word. He squeezed her hand firmly and left. Daniela stood there quietly, holding the documents, feeling the weight of the responsibility and honor she had just received. Don Fernando appeared coming out of his office. Did you know about this? Daniela asked. I knew. It was my idea, in fact. I'm old, Daniela. I won't last much longer at this pace. And when I'm gone, I want to know that the workshop is in good hands. In your hands. But, Don Fernando, no buts. You transformed this place. You did something I could never achieve. You deserve to be the owner, at least in part. And who knows, in a few years you might buy my share too and take over everything. Daniela hugged her old boss, now her partner. It was a moment of pure emotion, gratitude, and fulfillment. The years continued to pass. The workshop prospered more and more. Daniela eventually bought Don Fernando's share when he retired for good, becoming the majority owner. The training program became a full-fledged technical school with certified courses and official recognition. Many of the students who passed through there opened their own workshops, spreading the philosophy of inclusion and competence. The entire region changed, becoming known for having the highest number of female mechanics in the country. It all started with a girl who refused to give up on a yellow truck. Doña Carmen lived to see all this happen. She died at the age of 82, happy and proud of the daughter she raised. At her funeral, Daniela promised to continue honoring not only Tonio's legacy, but also that of her mother, who always believed in her, even in the most difficult moments. Doña Elena continued to be a constant presence in Daniela's life. They became very close, almost like mother and daughter. Elena always said that it was her way of keeping Tonio alive by helping her niece flourish. Miguel and Javier also prospered. Miguel eventually opened his own workshop in another city, but he always kept in touch and visited regularly. Javier took on the position of general manager of Daniela's workshop, taking care of the administrative side while she focused on the technical aspects. As for Ramon, he tried to open his own workshop, but went bankrupt in less than 2 years. They say he became bitter and lonely, blaming everyone but himself for his problems. Daniela took no pleasure in his failure, but she didn't feel sorry for him either. He had made his choices and now lived with the consequences. 20 years after that first day, Daniela was 43 years old. The workshop was an institution in the region, known not only for the quality of its work, but also for its social impact. Hundreds of women had gone through the training program, transforming their lives and proving that gender does not determine ability. On a typical workday, a young woman shyly entered the warehouse. She was about 18 years old with curly hair and a nervous manner. "Hello," she said. "I came to ask about the training program." Daniela smiled, recognizing in that girl the same insecurity she had felt decades ago. "Sure, what's your name?" Carolina Flores." "Nice to meet you, Carolina. I'm Daniela. Tell me why you want to work in mechanics." The girl hesitated before answering. "My dad was a mechanic. He taught me when I was little, but he's not here anymore. And everyone says it's a man's job and that I should do something else, but I don't want to do anything else. I want to fix engines just like he taught me." Daniela felt a twinge in her heart. It was like looking in a mirror of the past. "You know, Carolina, I've heard those same words many times. And you know what I've learned? That people will always have opinions about what you should or shouldn't do, but in the end, only you can decide who you want Abastias to be. So do you think I have a chance? I think that if you really want it, if you're willing to work hard and not give up when it gets tough, you can be anything, even the best mechanic in the region." Carolina smiled for the first time. "Like you, much better than me," Daniela replied, "because you're going to have something I didn't have at the beginning. Support, proper training, in a place where no one will tell you that you're not capable just because you're a woman." They talked for a long time. Daniela explained the program, showed her the facilities, and introduced her to other students. When Carolina left, she was radiant with hope and enthusiasm. That night, Daniela stayed alone in the shed. She went to the Wall of Honor, where photos of Tonio and her as a young woman still hung. Now there were more photos there of other women who had gone through the program and excelled. "Uncle," she said quietly, "today I met a girl who reminded me a lot of myself. She has the same fire in her eyes, the same determination, and I'm going to help her just like you helped me." The wind made the shed door knock softly, as if in response. Daniela smiled. "I know you're proud, and I'm going to keep making you proud. I'm going to keep proving that knowledge has no gender, that competition has no limits. I will continue to change lives one by one." She turned off the lights and left, ready to come back the next day and do it all over again, because that was her purpose, her passion, her legacy. It wasn't just about fixing engines. It was about righting injustices, opening doors, proving that anyone, no matter who they are, can achieve their dreams if they have enough courage. And it had all started with a yellow pickup truck that everyone said would never start again, but it did. And in doing so, it started much more than an engine. It started hopes, dreams, possibilities. It changed not only her own life, but the lives of countless other women who came after her. The yellow pickup truck was still there in the warehouse, preserved as a symbol. Daniela had turned down several offers to sell it. It was worth more than money. It was worth memories, lessons, inspiration. It was the beginning of everything. And every time a new student entered the program, Daniela would take her to that truck and tell the story of how she was just a scared girl, ridiculed by men who thought they knew better, the story of how she found strength in her uncle's legacy, the story of how she refused to give up even when everyone said it was impossible. And then she would say to the new student, "If I could do it, so can you. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." End of story. So what did you think of this story of overcoming adversity? Tell us in the comments and let us know if you think Daniela did the right thing in standing up to injustice. Your opinion is very important. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on other exciting stories that will inspire you. Thank you very much for joining us.